Well, here we are again, at the third and final session of this group of workshops we're calling Building Bridges. I'm Paul Rush, and along with your own local group leader, I'll be leading you through this workshop. We've been working with a few basic ideas throughout our time together. The idea that the Church's call to evangelism is an integral part of its mission in this world. The idea that only some of us are called to be evangelists, and therefore most of us aren't. And the idea that all believing Christians are called to be witnesses to what we know to be true in our own experience. We've looked at various Bible passages, including Peter, telling us to honour Christ as Lord in our hearts, to answer the questions that come up because of the hope that we show, and to do that with gentleness and respect, even if people badmouth us as a result. We've also looked at Paul's letter to the Colossians and seen the role that prayer plays in all this. Now, in this session, we're going to look at Acts and the letter to the Ephesians and the very practical enabling role of the Holy Spirit in our witnessing. We've done some spiritual reflection, both on the whats and the hows and the whos of our spiritual journeys, and also on the whys that are the bedrock of our faith. This session will briefly look at those who are called to be evangelists, and also at the ways the Holy Spirit enables our witness to Jesus. We've been working with a simple analogy, that of a barrister and a witness in a law court being somewhat like the role of an evangelist and a witness in the mission of the church. Both are needed in their different roles, with the barrister and the evangelist building up a case for their client and presenting it so as to get a positive verdict, where the witness is there to simply say what they know and leave it at that. So far we've spent our time looking at the witness's role, and rightly so, because we're all called to be witnesses to Jesus Christ and to what He's done in our own spiritual lives. But just for a moment, I'd like to look at the other side of the equation, at those that God has called and enabled to be evangelists. Because if God has called some to be evangelists, some of that some that God has called might be sitting there with you. And to be honest, I find that such people are really attracted by workshops like these. So maybe, just maybe, God is calling you to be an evangelist. Now, when anyone starts talking about evangelists, of course we automatically get a certain stereotype in our mind of a loud-mouthed, overconfident showman. Maybe a bit like this.
In the Lord and the power of His might. Put on the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. Thomas lived on 5th Avenue. Views of Central Park, even from the bathroom. Beautiful wife, 2 sweet kids. His life was a mess. And you know why? Because of the fear. Afraid his business would fail. Afraid his children would fall victim to foul play. Afraid his hair would fall out and his wife would stop loving him. Afraid of death. But death's a breeze. You ever heard anyone coming back to complain? No.
Amen, preacher.
So, he got himself a lawyer for his business, a guard for his babies, a $2,000 hairpiece, and a world-class doctor. But was Tom happy? No, you know. Because when Thomas finally came to me, he still had the fear. And the fear is bigger than lawyers and doctors. The fear is bigger than money or real estate. There's only one thing bigger than the fear, my friends. Only one thing. And that one thing is the faith. Faith that the universe will need his skill. Faith that this woman loves what's in his soul, not what's on his head. Faith that his children will be protected, not by a man with a .357 Magnum, but by the man with the 12-gauge supercharged grenade launcher of life. That man is Jesus Christ. And if you want to feel happy, all you gotta do. If you want to feel love, all you gotta do. If you want to feel safe, if you want to feel strong, if you want to walk tall, all you gotta do, all you gotta do, all you gotta do is get saved. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus.
Are you ready for a miracle?
Well, that's Steve Martin in the film Leap of Faith, a travelling preacher who's more showman than minister. He manages to fake healings and miraculous words of knowledge from town to town, and everything's going fine until a real healing seems to take place. But I won't spoil it for you. You can watch the film for yourself. But that's our picture, our paradigm of what we expect evangelists to be like. And I know it's a caricature, but the problem with caricatures is that they have to be close to the truth to be able to work as caricatures. And I've certainly come across people who would give Steve Martin's character, Jonas Nightingale, a run for his money. And to be perfectly honest, there's something in me that would enjoy that level of showmanship in our Sunday services. But, and this is important, not all evangelists are upfront show-offs. Many work quietly with small groups or one-to-one and don't like the limelight at all. Now, there's no simple blood test to find out whether you've been called by God to a specific ministry, and we aren't going to be taking blood samples at the end of the session. But there are some characteristics of the sort of people God tends to use in this way, so I thought I'd share them with you. First, evangelists tend to be adventurers, people who like crossing boundaries, a spirit that does not take easily to being tied down to the same thing time and time again. Almost a sort of restlessness. Give an evangelist a boundary and they'll cross it to see what it's like on the other side. Now, understanding the role of an evangelist, you can see how important this would be. Secondly, evangelists tend to be self-secure. Some would almost see it as arrogance, but it's a security in who God has made them to be, together with a belief that God can work through who they are, rather than in spite of them. Now, this obviously fits the performer evangelist, but the one-to-one or small group evangelist needs this attitude just as much to be able to face the possible rejection which is inherent in this ministry. Concern for outsiders is a sort of given, really, but evangelists often feel more at home within the culture of the rest of God's world than they do in church culture. Still, most of us would rather be down the pub than at a PCC meeting, but you get the point. There's an ability to relate to others without churchiness, but still communicate gospel truth. This communication is another mark of the sort of people God often uses as evangelists, and again, it's rather obvious, really. Evangelists are people who can gain people's trust. They have an integrity of character about them. They're people who can communicate ideas clearly and with the authority of knowing what they're talking about. And they're people who can deal with the emotional content of the message and of people's reaction to it. Lastly, evangelists seem to be what I call deal closers. They naturally look for the bottom line. What are people going to do as a result of the conversation? How does this encounter move people on in their spiritual journey? The gospel is not just about information. It's a challenge. Whose side are you on? So there they are, 5 characteristics, a sort of person specification you'd call it nowadays. Evangelists as adventurers, self-secure, concerned for outsiders, strong communicators and deal closers. Now, it might just be that you recognise that set of characteristics to some degree in yourself or in others you know in your own church fellowship. And if you do, it's possible that God is calling you, or them, to develop a ministry of evangelism. If you think it might be you, then talk it over with your local group leader or your church minister. There should be some training available to enable you to be better equipped for this task. And if you see this set of characteristics or something like them in someone else, well, then tell them about it and ask them whether they think God might be calling them to use their abilities to spread the good news about Jesus.